this is your coaching model, right? That we had talked about once before. You had a coaching model.
Yep. So the group cohort is going to those are redundant.
Okay.
In the cohort, I
Mhm.
will be teaching three different models that I've created. One
Okay.
of which you and I have talked about in the past is called the Dave method.
Hmm.
And Dave stands for discover, accept, visualize, and experiment.
Okay.
It's a process for creating change. It's a process for understanding oneself relative to situation more clearly and in a way that helps you understand what's in your control, what you can take action on, what not only your ideal outcomes could look like, but also creating space for the unexpected and the failure and the surprise to come in as well and be open to what you can learn from that through a process of iterative experimentation.
Okay. All right. And who would be kind of your ideal client that would tell me a little bit about your clients when it comes to, are these leaders in organizations or
Yeah.
first-time managers? Who's your ideal client?
Yeah. So the ideal client is a mid to senior level leader. I work with primarily the C-suite and EVP level professional,
Mm-hmm.
but I want to add some nuance in there, which is that I also work with founders
Okay.
and some solopreneurs, entrepreneurs whose uh, challenges are very similar to that of leaders of large groups in that what I find our work ultimately comes down to is decision making.
Mm-hmm.
Decisions, decisions, decisions. And in order to effectively make decisions on a daily basis on consequential topics or action, we've got to have some trust in ourselves to make a decision, allow it to unfold, and trust that we also have the resilience, the creativity, the open-mindedness to react and respond to what unfolds after that decision is made. These are important skills and perspectives for the C-suite
Mm-hmm.
and an executive level underneath that. And then for the kind of the more the mid-level professional who is either looking to improve the way they operate as a leader or in life in general, a program like the Defectors could be really good for them because from a monetary standpoint, it's not quite as expensive. But also, and this is something that was really important to me to offer in the space that will be the Defectors, is peer-to-peer wisdom transfer. Like I could dominate the Zoom call all day for an hour and a half for the 5 sessions we get together,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not going to make the kind of a difference in someone's life or work as hearing the like profound and powerful feedback that they can get from a peer or a near peer. And that's really the community space that I've been so eager to create with my coaching. So it's not just the one-on-one client has issue, coach has support and ideas and safe space for them to explore that issue, but it's we're adding to that now with a collective wisdom, some collective creativity and support. So I find that the majority of my clients who are executives, they crave the one-on-one kind of thought partnership with
Right.
me
Right.
and some chance. Actually, is a really good anecdote. The CEO and founder of large company up here in the Lake Forest, Illinois area, um, said to me last week, I believe it was, he said, I can talk to you in a way that I can't talk to any of my colleagues
Mm-hmm.
because I can't share half-baked ideas or uh, even like a feeling without them interpreting that feeling as cause for action on their end, right? Like my time with you, Dave, is like I could just open up about that and it's consequence free, it's judgment free, and we just like let it land and maybe it's nothing and maybe it's something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that for the executive level folks that are looking for that uh, um, objective
Hmm.
sounding board, thought partner, challenger,
Right,
yeah,
right.
this is the space for them working with me.
Yeah, that's what what a coach does. A lot of what a coach does is give them that space.
It's so wonderful, and it's in a
Mm.
way, it's almost like what teams hire a facilitator for
Hmm.
to theoretically, objectively get ideas out there fairly and help a team digest those ideas. I think oftentimes in a one-on-one way, a coach serves as that facilitator. It just happens to be with one person instead of
Person.
10 people.
Gotcha. Exactly. Exactly. So, Dave, can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you got into coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go back to age 12. I'm sitting in the living room of my friend Alex, and he's telling me about a girl he had been dating as insofar as 12-year-olds can date. Although I guess they're getting pretty into it currently in this generation, but rewind about 35 whatever years and 30 years. And Alex was confiding in me, and we happened to be doing what us adults would consider to be coaching in that moment. And his mom walked by and she goes, "You should be a psychologist." And I thought, I went to a psychologist when I was 7. My parents divorced when I was 6.5. My dad has cerebral palsy. Um, we had just moved to a new town. I was really struggling in school. There's just a lot of
Hmm.
intense factors affecting me as a young person. And I saw a child psychologist named Charlie Horowitz. And that was my first exposure to uh, like the helping field, the mental health and uh, personal well-being kind of field related to psychology and mental wellness. And then I found myself often in this position of being that listener and helper to a lot of friends. I was a psychology major in college. I went to college in Vermont and a wonderful psychology program at St. Michael's College. Shout out. But I actually started taking psychology classes in high school. I was really proud of like getting that ball rolling a little bit earlier on. My first job out of college was in a psychiatry department at the University of Vermont. But what's interesting about this is that while it was in the psychiatry department, where mental health is typically addressed through medicine, we were teaching cognitive behavioral therapy skills to people with chronic pain, depression, and anxiety. And I really valued the approach that the head of that program was taking by saying, yes, we can treat with medicine. And if we can introduce effective behavioral methods, people can actually implement more control over their pain, their grief, their mental well-being to some degree. And I would say that's what really set in stone my belief that there is so much within our control. There is so much choice that we have as human beings, even in a world that sometimes feels like it's on fire, to affect change in our personal space or in our body or in our family, community, company, industry, you name it. Um, However, I was offered an opportunity to pursue a PhD at the University of Vermont after about a year of working at that clinic and thought, you know what? I'm 22. I am a basket case. I am not ready to lock in for another 6 years of education. And I swung out into another passion of mine at the time, which was politics. And I worked in Washington, D.C., Boston, and New Hampshire for about 3 years in politics, followed by 5 years in public relations. Spent about 2.5 years at the Chicago Tribune and eventually swung my way into entrepreneurship of my own. So my last real traditional form of employment prior to becoming a full-time coach and having my own company was running a startup in the moving industry for almost 5 years. And I learned so much. I pretty much got paid to get my MBA,
Mhm.
uh, was a goal of mine. And that experience gave me a lot of the confidence and experience required to move into owning my own company and owning my own company, being my own boss, generating all my own business. It's something that I feel like actually gave me a major leg up in moving into a coaching position where you gotta you
Mhm.
got to generate all your own business, all of your own clients, unless you choose to opt into some of the coaching platforms. But that's a very abridged version, although probably longer than you wanted, explanation of
No,
kind of
that
what.
no, that was great. I appreciate that. I know you and I had talked about this MBA on the job, and I wanted to kind of dig a little deeper into that with your experience from a leadership perspective,
Hmm.
thinking about it. So tell me some good stories that you may have about when you had this company and uh, you used to call it, got my MBA on the job in how you building this company or
Yeah.
leading this company. What are some of the good stories that you have or takeaways that you have from that experience?
Yeah, I think one of the major takeaways is that the theory of business leadership or business management is is good to have, and it can make you competitive in the job market. But there's no comparison for getting involved with the people that will make the magic of your business happen. At the end of the day, I really found myself managing people who managed projects or initiatives or experiments. And so my job was to articulate a vision, create the parameters, the boundaries, and the expectations for what success could look like, and then enable people to perform in a way that also is resonant for them, in a way that was exciting for them. And I'm thinking about okay, I have a great example of, I think, a way in which this manifested itself productively. So I had a gentleman who had worked at IBM as an accountant, and he really wanted to get into sales. And no one was really taking him seriously for like the sales roles he was going out for. And then he sat down with us and I interviewed him and could tell like he had this special something that salespeople need. It's sort of a combination of charisma plus creativity and just an inherent service-oriented quality. And of course, I could trust he was a smart guy because he was an accountant at IBM. And we gave him an opportunity to start in sales. And for me, what was important about hiring him was I knew that we are going to get so much more out of this guy because of how passionate he is about proving, not to me or to anybody else on our team, that he could sell, but to prove to himself that he could do it. So, with regard to like a leadership story, I would say if you are involved in hiring or developing talent, if you can find the people who are obsessed with proving to themselves that they can accomplish something, and that aligns with what needs to be accomplished for the business, man, you are going to develop an all-star team. So how could one do that? How can you convert that wisdom into action?
Mhm.
questions in the interview process, curiosity with open-ended questions that don't lead. So a question like what matters most to you about your work experience? What boxes have you left unchecked so far? What would it be like for you to experience a version of yourself in this role that you have never experienced in any other role? What bores you? What lights you up? Some questions that would feel like they might be a waste of time in a half-hour interview. They're actually the questions that are most important to me. Like just getting down to the essence of the person, because
Right.
then if we know that this person is a fit from a human level
Mhm.
and they're smart enough to do the work, we can plug them in.
Right, right. Yeah, I think those questions are very important. I do a lot of transition work, career transition work, and that's one of the things that I coach my clients when they're going in on these interviews is that it's you have the skills. They know you have the skill, you did this resume, that's why you're sitting in front of them. It's just a matter of they want to know you.
Yeah, yeah,
They want to know you. It's not a question you can't do the work, but they want to know you. And and people a lot of times are afraid of interviews, don't like it. And I say, it's just a conversation. This is not a tennis match. It's a conversation. It's my analogy is it's like dating. I'm getting to know you, you know.
yeah,
It's like going on that first date and I'm getting to know you and we want to know each other because we got something in common, right? We kind of like each other and you want to work here. Okay, kind of thing. So that's my analogy. It's like just like dating. So, be yourself, and those are the better questions than you asking me about, and I'm not trying to say behavioral questions in an interview are bad. I'm not saying that. But you really want to get to the gut of the person and really understand what it is that they want in
yeah,
in their job. What is it that they
yeah.
really want in their job? So, and be able to express that and feel vulnerable enough to express that to say to go for it. I kind of had an experience myself with that the other day where was talking to a client and they weren't too sure of me and I was like, "Well, see if you let's have another meeting." Okay, because the first meeting was kind of rocky. And I said, well, open to another meeting? Well, we'd be happy to have another meeting. Had another meeting and we gelled. So sometimes it might take two, you know what I mean? But we gelled and now we're off to the races, now we're ready, we're planning what we're going to do next. So, but you're right, people are human. At the end of the day, we're all human. So
Yeah.
I like that. What else about the MBA in leading the company would you say was your biggest aha moment in being a leader for that company?
That's a good question. Give me a moment to consider that.
Okay, sure. Take your time.
I think my biggest aha moment was becoming comfortable enough so for context, this startup was private equity backed. So there was
Okay,
a level of leadership and demands and expectations
right.
around the work that I was doing, which included all of my employees and then some adjacent service partners and vendors. And the biggest aha moment for me in that ecosystem was it being okay to say, I don't know, how will this go? Or what are we going to do here? Or how does this look? To be willing and confident enough to say, I don't know, but I do know that we have the people or the resources to get some more information and run the experiments necessary to gather the data that I am looking for or some other stakeholder is looking for. And so that can go for a uh, intern asking if they can get paid to or the CFO of the private equity group saying, what's it going to look like if we uh, take this strategic approach versus that one, right? Big questions for the individual asking the question.
Mhm.
It's my responsibility to understand this is a really important question to this person. It could also be very important to me. Uh, but regardless of my orientation or my urgency around that question or request, it's important to that person. So what I need to do is not jump the shark and give an answer that is uninformed. What I need to do is say, I hear how important this is to you. I'm going to gather the information and the data that we would collectively need to move forward on that decision. And I'll let you know that by X date. Does that work for you? Right. So this is pretty like nuts and bolts stuff, and in that it's the unsexy, rather boring quality of leadership that isn't talked about a lot in graduate programs. Like what you got to do is not sound smart. What you have to do is sound present and be in a position of receiving the
Mhm.
inquiry,
Mhm.
and then be able to prioritize investigating that inquiry among all the other ones you're getting from all the other stakeholders in your ecosystem.
Right. Okay. That's one of the qualities of a good leader. I think it's a good leader. So, another thing, is there anything else you want to share before I move on to my next question about that MBA on the job?
There is actually, which is that there are so many changes happening inside of universities. There have been for the last, let's say, 10 years. The the academy has been like trying to figure out how to get product market fit for the way that people live their lives and educate themselves now, what they can afford, what they want, what they don't want. So a lot of these graduate programs are going to the wayside, or they're going online, or they're whatever. My challenge to anyone that wants to get more education is to look for it as creatively as you want that education to make you. Does that make sense?
Mhm. I think I'm understanding. So, I know a lot of programs. I've taught in universities years back, and a lot of programs can be kind of cookie cutter. So if you're looking for a program that's kind of, always taught in the graduate school, so I didn't teach undergrad, but programs that, not to say I want a degree in this, but what's going to give you a knowledge. I always tell my students, um, give you a basis to be able to produce knowledge for the next
That's
level
beautifully said.
of
Yeah,
what it is
yeah,
you want to go into.
yeah.
Because a master program is about becoming a master. And my students used to struggle with that little creative thinking piece because it's like, no, I can tell you what has been, but I want you to take what has been and be able to produce the next level of knowledge on that. That's what I'm looking for. So you got to think.
Mm,
Okay.
yeah.
Not just take it in. Undergrads, we learn how to think, but you've got to learn how to take it to the next level. And so I spent a lot of time um, kind of educating my students and understanding that because I could give them a history of how a certain well my industry was human resources and learning and development and OD, that kind of stuff. And I can give them a history of what has happened when I came through organizations and where we are now compared to when my soapbox and we were fighting for certain things. But I need you to take that and move that up a notch. I need you to produce the next level of knowledge to take that to the next level. So that's looking for a program that's going to give you that, looking for professors that are going to, um, I guess, what should I say? It's going to kind of not demand, but charge you with being able to think. They want you got to think.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And that might
kind of
not
teacher.
that
That's
also might not come in a traditional university setting. You
yeah.
might find that that occurs in a virtual certificate program or a workshop, right? And it's another thing that I would recommend that people get curious about is how could I cobble together the kind of knowledge base that I want on my own, using disparate parts to pull it all together. There's this really powerful concept of inefficient preparation that's talked about a lot. It's kind of the basis of this wonderful book called Second Act by Henry Oliver. I'm looking over at my bookshelf at it. And the idea behind inefficient preparation is that we have all these, many people, especially us weird ones that are sort of, our lives look like the map or the quilt behind me, right? Like it's a whole framed object, but it's made up of these disparate pieces that needed to be stitched together. Inefficient preparation is the process of trying out different things and having some faith that at some point these different things will like synthesize or converge together in a really unique way that just that person who has experienced them can offer in the form of insight, creativity, service, invention, support, leadership for just the right moment and
Mhm.
group of people or initiative. I absolutely love this idea of inefficient preparation. I'll give you an example of it. From my own life. My very first job that I ever had was rolling hot dogs and dropping French fries at this rail car diner in Schenectady, New York, where I grew up. And the other people working there were low income, generally like undereducated, blue collar, hourly type workers. Being exposed to those kinds of people really early on helped me see that these people exist. They're everywhere. They help the world go round. They have a heart. They are human beings. They have things that matter to them, right? Maybe one day I will be working with them again, right? Flash forward to when I was leading the startup that I mentioned, we had a whole band of hourly workers that came from lower to middle class income, not necessarily highly educated. And because I had the humanity, the empathy of being 14 and working shoulder to shoulder with these people and valuing them, I could also see the value in hiring them, coaching them, training them, challenging them in ways that they hadn't been challenged before by other employers. And that was a result of inefficient preparation. What the hell is working on hot dogs in a diner at 14 going to have to do with the way I lead when I'm 30 plus? It actually had quite a lot to do with it.
Mhm. That's yeah. You know how we used to grow up in organizations. Remember years ago, people started like in the mailroom. You're right.
Yeah.
They started at the bottom, and people used to grow up in organizations. So I think they had more of that type of mentality when we used to do that. Now they hop,
Yep. Yeah.
but yeah, you used to grow up in universities. I mean, in organizations. I remember that. So, and I think a lot of that comes from the fact that you have that humility and that empathy because you did grow up in an organization. So, but that's for another day. You know how that goes. That's not the way we work so much today.
Yeah.
But that was a good experience for you, as a teenager. It helped you later in life. Just
Yeah.
that's a great example. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Another thing, Dave, that we had mentioned last time we talked was getting unstuck. Do you
Yeah.
remember us talking about that? So
Yeah.
tell me more about what your thoughts on getting unstuck
Yeah.
in context of leadership.
Yeah. Well, first thought is to acknowledge that it's not easy to get unstuck. It is an active participatory experience to move oneself from stuck to unstuck. It takes work, it takes effort. Anyone who has gotten to a level of leadership has probably gotten themselves unstuck many times before and used a certain set of behaviors, skills, or perspectives to get unstuck. And one of the things that I would challenge any leader who is feeling stuck right now to do, you don't have to hire a coach for this. You don't have to read a book for this. You don't have to listen to a podcast for this. Just check in with your own history about what you've done in the past that you might not have at that time considered an active feat of getting unstuck. But if you really assess it now, you could see that, oh, I am capable of shifting this way, or I am capable of thinking about something differently. I'm capable of seeing opportunity rather than only risk. Uh, and the list goes on, right? We are so much more capable than we give ourselves credit for. And sometimes we just don't see it in the context of getting ourselves unstuck. But we make decisions every day. They have consequences. They involve other people. Sometimes they involve other people's money or their livelihood or their safety, their well-being and their happiness. We're making decisions every day that move the ball forward on something, which means we are capable already of getting ourselves unstuck. Now, sometimes we are so stuck that our blinders have really tightened and it becomes difficult to see the breadth of our choice and our options. And that's when I'm working with clients, I start using some tools like the Dave method that we talked about earlier. You go through a process of discover, look at your situation like an explorer, like you've never seen it before. You'll notice something new. Accept, accept the fact from the fiction. 90% of what's going on inside of our heads is fiction. It's like feelings and worries and expectations and doubts and projections. That is all it is a fact that we may be noticing them, but it is not a fact in the real world that those things are happening. The facts are very few usually. It's here are my actual limitations. Here are my actual opportunities, which, as paradoxical as it sounds, the opportunities actually tend to outnumber the limitations. And here's what I'm capable of doing with this information. Right now, visualize what kind of outcome or outcomes do you want to see
Mhm.
based on the facts that you're working with, right? Because that those facts can help us kind of narrow in the kind of effort we put into this vision once we've declared it. And then we'd start to experiment. So, based on that vision for an ideal outcome and allowing for the possibility of unknown or less than ideal outcomes to potentially also be useful to us, let's start experimenting. And the key here in experimentation phase is to be absolutely obsessed and in love with the experiment,
Mhm.
not the outcome.
Mhm.
Best scientists in the world, all they care about is a high fidelity experiment, right? Their tools, their measuring system, and their hypothesis are all perfectly dialed in so that they can trust not the meaning of the data when it comes out, but that they can trust that the data is valid. That's exactly what I always am advocating for people to do with their experiment, but just be in love with the experiment and allow outcomes to reveal themselves because that's just more data you can use to get to start that phase all over again. So that is a bit of a longer process of getting unstuck, right? So that's a process that would involve a month or maybe 3 months or 6 months. This big change kind of uh, process there for the Dave method. And you can do it quickly, sort of back of the napkin for something less consequential, but that's a really good method or process to use for big change that you're exploring. or big change that is happening to you.